Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samaj and Mr. Stress-Free Ratanjit S. Sondhe. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
This is Stress-Free Living. Ray Samaj with you today, but unfortunately I am not going to be involved much in the show because, as you can hear, I am grateful, but I am still afflicted this morning with something going on in my throat. So I will introduce you to Ratanjit, and he has assembled a couple of other people with him today that will be assisting him with the show. This, ladies and gentlemen, my dear friend and my co-host for all of these years, welcome Ratanjit Sondhe.
Well, Ray, nobody can replace you, and I hope you feel much better quickly. But again, we are very fortunate. At the last minute notice, we have two great scholars who are going to join us. And I have Dr. Professor Param Srikantia, who is a sought after speaker. He has spoken to thousands of people, and he was very kind to accept the last minute invitation. And then we have Professor Ray Gehani, who is also an amazing scholar. He has written several books, and both of these gentlemen have 3 or 4 PhDs. I don't know how many PhDs they have. And so I am illiterate in front of them. So welcome, gentlemen. How are you feeling today?
Thank you so much, Ratanjit. I'm feeling quite well. Dr. Gehani?
Dr. Gehani, how are you doing? Can you open up your...
Good. Thank you so much.
Well, so we are continuing with our program we did last Saturday, which is 360 degrees of expectations. So it appears that this was suggested by Dr. Gehani, and we felt that we have not covered that completely. So we are starting. So if you have, gentlemen, if you have any comment to start the show or any questions or any concerns, so please, let's start the show.
Excellent. Thank you. I'd like to begin by welcoming all our viewers and listeners across Northeast Ohio and other regions of the world to another potentially scintillating exchange of views, insights, and perspectives from Mr. Ratanjit Sondhe. And I'm very grateful for my co-host, Ray Gehani, Dr. Gehani, who has also joined us in this endeavor. It's one of those things where Ray has no voice today, but he has all the brilliant questions. And I have none of the brilliant questions, but I have the voice. So this kind of synergy is something that reminds me of an ancient Eastern parable. You know, in the East, we talk about the interplay between the intellect and the heart. Which one is more important? Is it the mind that is more important or the heart that is more important? And in leading a meaningful life, should we be led by the powers of the mind or the powers of the heart? So there is a parable that goes about how there is a house that catches fire, and the mind is pictured as a blind man who can run very fast, who has lost his sight, but he is capable of running very fast. And the heart, on the other hand, is pictured as somebody who can see. The person has sight, but he has been handicapped by injury and is not able to move. And if these two people who are handicapped in different way have to take themselves out of this burning house, they will need to work together. And apparently the parable goes that it is the man who's fit, who's capable of running, but who cannot see, picks up the other gentleman who's capable of seeing but is not able to move. And in that synergistic partnership, both of them come to safety. The parable is intended to awaken people to the importance of having the heart serve the mind It's only when the mind and heart come together that a resolution can be found. Similarly, I would imagine the partnership between Ray and me is along the same lines. I have the voice, and if Ray can somehow transmit his superluminous skills at being hosting the show, I will be able to absorb some of that and perhaps take the ship to safety. Precisely, that's what transmission looks like, the transmission of unconscious energetic fields. Thank you so much. With that little introduction, I'd like to announce that I was informed that the topic for today is all about expectations. And many of you might have heard the idiom, expectations, good expectations pave the way to hell. So I would like to begin by asking Mr. Sondhe to clarify a little more about this topic. And in posing this, I would like to confuse the subject a little, as is often my propensity given my profession as a college professor. There is the other side of the coin where we have heard about the power of the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you've heard about the book Pygmalion in the Classroom, the research studies that have actually indicated that expectations were instrumental in elevating performance. For example, the controversial study which was performed at a time where there was nothing like research ethics, a group of psychologists go into a school, they test all the children and create 3 equally matched groups, equated in terms of their intellectual abilities. But they tell the professors, this group is the most intelligent group. They are likely to sail through with flying colors. This group has to put in exceptionally hard work. They're very weak as students, and this group is just average. It's a mischievous trick to create a level of expectations. They come back after 5 years, and then they discover that when these students are tested, the group that was thought to be the high-performing group had actually surpassed everybody else, and the group that was thought to be weak had actually lost its IQ points. So here's an example where, the psychologists then talked about how expectations can have a positive effect, that they can actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because these children were related to as if they were super luminous, and they ended up fulfilling the hidden and the expectations that were implied in that situation. So I want to start the discussion helping us. We want you to help us clarify these 2 divergent views of the power of expectations. One that talks about how expectations pay the way to hell, and the other that talks about how it's expectations that actually elevate collective human performance. Sorry, that was a very long question, but you have a college professor as a host. Every question will be a little speech.
Dr. Gahani, do you have a comment on this question? I'll welcome your comment before I indulge.
So I heard the recording that you had presented.
Thank you.
And, I liked the fact that I think Ray brought out, the inner expectations, the external expectations. And he kept on harping that, our bosses expect certain things from us. Our family members expect certain things from us. Now, after hearing all the discussion, which was a very interesting discussion, it went beyond what we had originally thought. I had this feeling, so I'll present it to you. And the feeling is that very often we crisscross between describing what is, describing what can be, and describing what should be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I'm talking about what is, and you are suggesting what should be, our wires are crisscross. I mean, they are going, parallel. So the dialogue doesn't connect, it doesn't grow. So I really think that point of view, I call it POV, the point of view is very important. Are we discussing descriptive reality, sort of an existential reality or a hopeful reality? If you could address that, I would appreciate that.
Well, these are amazing insights. So let me start with, there are expectations which are basically essential for us to survive. And I call them as a natural laws. You have if the gravitational force, a scientist bases the development knowing that that gravitational force is reliable, dependable. So our expectation to natural laws, which we discover, has resulted into development of science and technology because they are completely reliable. So we expect from those things that they will be always there. They are natural laws. And then there are social expectations. The social expectations are man-made laws and man-made. So there are laws which are designed by good-meaning people, but they are different in different countries and different part of on earth. So those laws change many times when a government changes, or even if you have somebody has committed some crime and it is taken to court, and the attorney will say you have 50-50 chances. So it all depends on the argument presented. So those expectations are basically, they cause us stress because they are not 100% reliable. So any expectation which is not totally reliable will cause stress. And then we have personal expectation. I expect from my spouse, I expect from my children, I expect from my friends. And most of those expectations are, again, many people who your friends and your family many times don't even know what you are expecting from them. We give a gift to somebody and we expect a gift back. So, and then we have expectation from ourselves. So the students, Dr. Skantia talked about when we have expectation from our children to perform higher, they end up performing higher. What we have done is we have taken away their fear of failure in one sense, which holds us in prison. Because if we rely only on our personal I want to succeed in the class, I want to have all my grades to be straight A's, that is my expectation. But then I have a doubt within me. So that doubt within me, because I'm not sure whether I can do that, the doubt is reduced by somebody's belief or somebody's expectation. So that is why that is psychologically helps us. But I want to go a little further. There are two directions of expectation. One direction is I'm expecting things from society, from friends, but the expectation is coming towards me. I am expecting. And there is another expectation, which is from me to others. What is that I need to do for others? But now in both these expectations, if we are basically parked in our fear, in our greed, in our ego, then they all will cause tremendous amount of stress. So whether we utilize this tool of expectation to help us or to hurt us, it all depends on what is directing us. If it is directed by our fear, if it is directed by our greed, if it is directed by our ego, then we are putting ourselves to a tremendous amount of stress scenario. So that is why expectations end up causing tremendous amount of stress. So I'd like to have some feedback on what I said from both of these great scholars, whether I'm talking about something which is theoretical or it is really practical. Paramji, you want to take on?
What you were saying made complete sense to me. I also appreciated Gehani's distinction between what Harry Stack Sullivan calls an anticipatory reality versus the current reality we are living in.
Right.
But I think to my question, when you were able to clarify that the expectations in the study that I recounted served more as a device to clear away the debris of anxiety, of stress, of self-doubt, so that people could rise to the fullness of their potential. And I think that really clarified it for me at a deep level, because sometimes when we use the word expectations, language is very limited in being able to describe the complex nature of psychic and social realities. And the expectations that you talked about completely can, the way that you expressed it, when we can clear away those obstacles of self-doubt, we can flower to the fullness of potential. That certainly made complete sense. I want to also invite you to comment upon another distinction that I've heard being used with this. We talk about expectations with attachment and expectations without attachment. When there's an expectation with an attachment, there is a narrow sense of willingness to go along with something only if it is fulfilled in exactly the way in which it is envisioned. So there's a strong sense of attachment to a particular outcome. When you have transcended attachment, you can playfully have expectations. There can be playfulness around expectations. Then expectations might lose their oppressive character. Then you're not putting yourself in the psychic prison of oppressive expectations, but you're playing, you're dancing with expectations, but you have no attachment to any of those coming true. Just like you might playfully buy a lottery ticket, the state lottery ticket, and say, let's see what happens. That really is not an expectation. It's more of, a playful engagement with reality. So I think you've clarified it beautifully.
I think before we answer this question, let's take a quick break, and then we will come right back and discuss that. So we'll have a 2 minutes break, and in the break, we'll open it up to our Zoom participants and have an open discussion. But let's take a break. So now we are...
Anybody can talk. Hello.
Yeah.
This is Gulberg Singh. And I heard the part, and especially I'm referring to one part only, where we talked about the three groups of students and how they came out to be after 5 years. It is an expectation of the, let's say, teacher. However, my experience says one's own mind, one has expectation from own mind, but more than even expectation, I'm using a different word. When I feel positive about, yes, I can do it, I'm going to do it, or whatever, I think of the positive result for any effort I get to. It is automatic that one succeeds farther than if one has any doubts whatsoever. So it's almost kind of self-motivation. or self-expectation. And that's what was talked about a little later in the conversation, that may be another part of expectation.
Ray, please keep a time and let us know. So,
I will let you know when we hear the music.
Okay. So, Paramjit, any other comments? I think Ray, Kahani Saab's video is off, so he probably have gone to, oh, there.
He's back.
There it is.
Okay.
My battery was down, so I was trying to get some charge.
Okay. So we are back on live, and so Paramji, your question, could you repeat that question so that we are refreshed after this break?
Absolutely. Ratanjit, I was just asking about the role about expectations with attachment and expectations without attachment.
Right. So see, what happens is if you see a mother, and mother's expectation for it, what she does for the child, she goes tirelessly. She in her mind is decided that she is going to help the child in whatever way. If child is sick, and her expectation from her to deliver the service or whatever needed help for the child, that expectation is completely synchronized. She has her brain with it, she has her heart with it, she has her intelligence with it. So that kind of a expectation always is delivered. When I have expectation for me, I want this thing to, I have a project which I want to do, but then I have some time. So I am expecting, I'm under the pressure, but then I'm not as committed as I'm committed many times. Now, if I have a deadline to meet and my job depends on it, my livelihood depends on it, then that expectation I'll carry through. But the other expectation you mentioned, buying a lottery ticket, the expectation where we are simply, that is really not an expectation in true sense. And that expectation is, it happens, good, it doesn't happen, good. But really, expectation is a tool, is in my way of thinking. And expectation, when it is contaminated with our greed and fear, it becomes a problem. It becomes a hurdle. It becomes a stress-causing situation. If the expectation has a joy attached with it, there is an expectation which is attached with pleasure, the expectation which is attached with joy. The expectation which is attached with pleasure, now I distinguish between pleasure and joy differently than most of the people would. I consider pleasure to be experienced by our five senses. What tastes good, what looks good, what make me rich, so all those five senses experience pleasure. So if I'm part with expectation, which is going to deliver pleasure, and that has a different kind of motivation to achieve. And then there is a joy. Joy is something which is felt by your heart. And that only comes to us by making a difference to others. And that expectation, if I am able to make a difference, if I am a doctor and I have a patient who comes to me and I want to make sure that this patient is somehow treated and becomes healthier. That is my expectation, which gives me joy, which gives me inner satisfaction. There is a much higher degree of incentive attached to that. And that also is not as stress causing as the expectation which are attached to my pleasure, because attached to my pleasures are also tied to my greed and fear. So the other side of my expectation, which comes from my joy, is motivating for us. So I'll let Dr. Gahani or you make a comment on what I said.
I really am enjoying how you're peeling the multiple layers of this onion, helping us understand subtle distinctions that often are conflated and not really understood. I would clearly see how, if expectation comes with a gentleness of acceptance, of love, of the desire to make a positive contribution, the purifying element of love will actually be able to cleanse expectation and take away some of its deleterious and negative impact. So I think to help us understand, where does the expectation arise from? Does that arise from an ego-based consciousness, greed, the desire to dominate the other, or an insecurity? Because very often our expectations arise from states of deficit. But when expectations arise from generosity of, true generosity and true love, it changes the nature of that phenomenon completely. I wanted to introduce, before I pass it on to Dr. Gahani, another element of how the ancient mystics have talked about the debilitating negative impact of expectations. So we talk about the pendulum mind. The pendulum mind moves like a pendulum. It lives in the past, it goes to the future. It lives in the past and it goes to the future. One of the things that the pendulum mind misses consistently is the present. And expectations about the future often transport us to a level of unreality, because future is life that has not happened, past is life that has already happened. Life is happening in the here and now. And many of us, and Osho talks about that as the waiting for Godot syndrome, are waiting to be happy tomorrow. We sacrifice this moment. We don't enjoy this moment fully. We don't engage with this moment fully. We don't dance with reality in the here and now, but we are engaged with a horizon of expectations. I'll be happy when I graduate, I'm in high school and I'm away from my parents. I'll be happy when I'm in college. I'll be happy when I graduate from college, when I get a job, when I fall in love, when I have children, and all of that. And somehow this horizon of expectations about the future often is like chasing a horizon. You move towards it and you never reach it. And it's almost like the distance between where we are and our expectations of what reality will be like remains a constant. So you could be going through life, missing life completely because we are missing the joy of this moment, the sheer delight of having this uncharted conversation about expectations. If we can just be here, all of a sudden, reality reveals itself in all its magnificent glory. I want to turn it over to...
expecting things to happen either puts you in the future. And making things happen puts you in the present. So if your expectation is not brought into the present, it does not become a reality. Expectance can be used as a guide to operate in the present for a task. Okay, if I want to deliver something for somebody, I have to move into the present to make it happen. If I remain in the future, I'm expecting and doing nothing, and then that's where all our anxiety and all our this thing comes in. And there is another thing which we must realize: change is constant. Everything is changing. So if we do not participate in change and only sit there on the sideline expecting, then we will be victim of the change. Or if we participate in the change, because knowing that everything is going to change, we better change it the way we want it. So then you participate in the change, you remain in the present, and you make things happen. And then there is another thing is that we have to always keep in mind a fundamental reality. If our expectations are not immersed in that fundamental reality, they will backfire. And the fundamental reality is that we are all one. I cannot be happy in a seclusion. I have to create an environment of happiness where everybody participates in that happiness. So if my expectations are only to add value to myself, only to serve myself at the cost of others, then I'm going to be going against that truth and that reality. And consequence of that is always going to be backfiring us. So if I am constantly mindful of that reality of oneness, whereas when I have an expectation, I validate that expectation, whether it is meeting that criteria of oneness or no. If it does, then I will have a double endorsement from within, my endorsement from my mind, as well as my heart. So that reality then becomes a value-adding pathway. So, Ghani Sahab, I cut you off, and you had something to say. Please.
Oh no, I'm enjoying listening, so that's wonderful.
So, Paramji, did I make any sense?
To say that you made some sense is a masterpiece of an understatement. I think you're spewing out profound wisdom, and it is helping elevate me. In fact, I'm able to develop a better sense of empathy for Ray's dynamism, because your words to me become so profound that I get entangled in absorbing, assimilating, and appreciating the wisdom, and I'm speechless. So I can just imagine the level of personal mastery Ray must have attained to be able to appreciate the wisdom that you spew and be so nimble on his feet and so agile with his questions. So thank you, Ray. Ray, do you have a question, despite the fact that your voice is a little... is there something that you would say? I'm sure as you're watching the unfolding discussion, you've had a perspective or two that you could inject.
Again, I'm very limited here today with what I can communicate. But Ratanjit, I think the reality is that we are constantly surrounded by such levels of expectations. We get hung up on worrying about what people think about us as much as what we are expecting of ourselves. And so I'd like you to share a few more thoughts on that. How can we kind of ignore that? Is that, or should we? Is that important that we are considering what others expect of us? Or should we be just focused on what we can control?
It's a very good question, Ray. You're mastered asking questions, and your presence is being deeply missed. But you see, again, if I am worried about what people are going to say and my expectation are all focused on that, then actually I am driven in absence. I'm practicing absence of oneness. In the presence of oneness, we also must realize that we are not the ego, we are not the fear, we are not the greed. That all that comes to us through human body mode. We have talked about that many times. The human body where we live, which is our housing, human body is gifted with incredible talent, incredible skills, but this human body is also naturally equipped to protect itself. And in that wisdom, it will have fear, it will have greed, it will have ego. So if we are being operated by the human body mode, our expectations are always going to cause stress. They are always going to be worried about what people are going to think about me because you are thinking in the ego mode. And it is only in the oneness mode, means when we engage our enlivening power, which is present in this human body. This enlivening power has only one agenda, which is to serve that enlivening power present in others. So it is not looking for praise, or it is not looking for validations, or it is basically focused on adding the highest value. How does it serve the divinity present in others? So it is only under that circumstance that we will have empowering expectations. They are going to direct us. Those expectations are only going to direct us to add the highest value.
But what if we are doing the best we can, adding the highest value, but that fails to meet the expectations of others around us? How do we cope with that situation when we know we're doing the right thing, but it fails by other standards?
Well, see, if we are not taking all our criticism as criticism, if we are not facing through our ego, it's not going to hurt, then the criticism becomes additional exploring directions. Can I do better? What somebody is saying, is there any validation to what they are saying? So suddenly, again, remember, change is constant. So my direction coming from change is that I have to make my last best better. So I am on that path. So being on the path, I should take pointers by somebody's dissatisfaction, by somebody's criticism, but do not take it in a personal mode. Take it just like our teacher in our classroom criticizes us. No, your work is not good. But instead of getting insulted, you go back to work, trying to improve yourself. And if you take that in the right mode, it improves you. It makes you better. I think we need to take a quick break at this point, and we will be right back.
That was perfect, Ratanjit. You are becoming quite the host. Nice. All right. And everybody, we have a couple minutes. You'll have, let's see, you'll have about 12 minutes. We stop at 9:58.
Oh my God.
Okay, so we'll have, about 12 minutes when we come back.
Any feedback, Basi Saab or Ghani Saab or Paramji?
I can only say I am so lucky to be here listening to you. You are so, I mean, I don't even have words to say how good you are. And then this makes so much sense, the way you explain it. And not only that you have the knowledge, but you also have a way to express it in such a way that person like me can easily understand it. That's all I gotta say.
You're very kind. We are very kind. I'm looking for criticism so I can improve. Ghani sir,
Does anybody have, for the last, if you've got time to take it in a different direction, do either of our professors have a different slant that you can bring in to take it a little different?
So I'll go back to Ray's comments, right? And you know, I think it's a everyday happening that people expect certain things. In fact, they want you to be perfect, and particularly, spousal relationships are very interesting. If you're quiet, they want you to be vocal, and if you're vocal, spouse wants you to be quiet, right? So the expectations is, as I'm listening to this and as I listened to the previous presentation, I think expectations are dynamic. Okay. And I think what we
are back on live. I think we were having a discussion with Ghani Saab. Ghani Saab, why don't you continue what you're saying so we can understand what your question was?
So I'm going back to Ray's comments that there are expectations of others, and when we don't meet those expectations, we feel miserable. And what I was trying to say is that based on what I heard last time and based on the discussion we have today, expectations per se are dynamic.
Yes.
I mean, you mentioned change, they change. So now what we are trying to do is articulate a dynamic thing into more, linear course of discussion. So that's a challenge. Now, I want to add another perspective, and that is, and I think, we are overlapping some of these ideas, but because, Ray wanted a new perspective. Expectations can be values driven. So once we are clear on our values, for example, your value for oneness is very clear, right? So if expectations don't align to oneness, you feel you're out of sync or out of balance, right? So similarly, if our value is truthfulness, right? And then others are not being truthful, we will not worry about them if we value truthfulness at a very high level, right? So I think expectations are like watering the leaves and values are like a trunk of a tree. Mm-hmm. So if we water the trunk of a tree, I think a whole lot of other things will fall in place.
Automatically come in play.
Right. So things get aligned because otherwise, as I was sharing earlier, as we have experienced with our spouses and our children, they always want you to be something different. If you're quiet, they want you to be vocal. If you're vocal, they'll criticize that why are you so vocal? Why aren't you quiet? So I think pandering to expectations is a challenge. But once you're aligned with your values, then you say, this is what I believe in. This is what I stand for. Proverbially, they say, if you don't tell us what you stand for, you'll fall for anything. You'll fall for any expectation. So Ray, I would suggest, coming from where you are coming, reflect and say, okay, what are my values? What is sacred to me? And then see if I can align my behaviors and expectations and conduct with that.
It's a very important point, and thank you for bringing this. We all feel that we have values. We all feel that I'm an honest person, I do good work and all that. But we are we have to be mindful that all these values, which we consider our values, if they are in the human body mode, they will always nurture your ego.
Good
You
point.
will talk about it, you will flaunt it, you will write it, but when nobody is watching you, you do not practice them. So this is what is going on in this world. Our true value system comes from just one seed of oneness. When I see myself as part of you, it doesn't make any sense to lie to you. Honesty happens. And I see your pain and suffering, compassion happens. And all these good things we talk about in the value system are barely coming out of this one seed of oneness. And it is, people say, Ratanjit, you only talk about oneness, and let's talk about the real life. That is not reality. Oneness is not reality, but unfortunately, that is the only reality there is. Anything other than that is only going to misdirect us. Doesn't matter how much intelligence we have, how much education we have, how much resources or money we have, we are always going to be part in our ego or fear or greed. And that is what you see around us. And until we understand and comprehend fully what oneness is, we are not going to handle any aspect of our life. Paramji, you have been quiet. Can we have some feedback from you?
Once again, I've been absorbing your insights in the same manner that the thirsty summer earth absorbs the first rainfall, with just as much readiness and absorptive capacity. So really been enjoying this so much. I can completely see how it is possible for any of us to fall into the trap of indirect egoistic glorification by proclaiming our values. And then, unless there is the true recognition of oneness that is rooted in an ego-transcendent consciousness, a celebration of the oneness, at a very deep level, anything that we do, the existential philosophers talked about being and doing. There is your being, which represents your state of consciousness. And from that being, certain actions emanate, which is what you do. And the quality of your actions is going to be given by where you're standing, by the being. So I can see that the consciousness of oneness is what comes first. And from that consciousness, a totally different set of actions will emanate if you have arrived at that.
See, we are always told to be a good person, so to do good tasks. And all of us do tremendous amount of good tasks. In US, charity is amazing. There are $4 billion given to charity, and 70% of that is not by corporation, but by individuals. So we are very charitable people. So we are always doing good. And by doing good, only at the time if somebody gives us credit. If we want to give somebody a charity, we want our name to be recognized. We want somebody to understand that I have given them. So we are doing good things, but we have never become goodness itself. So the clear difference is when you become goodness itself, without your knowing, goodness comes out of you. It is like a beautiful rose flower. It is very beautiful. It gives fragrance, but it is wrong to say that it gives fragrance, because it is fragrance. It doesn't have to do anything to give fragrance. In fact, it doesn't even know that it gives fragrance. So once you are part in oneness, automatically you become goodness itself, because you see no difference between you and others, and you are basically internally incentivized to make a difference, incentivized to add value. You are now part, instead of in the pleasure mode, in the joy mode. And pleasure, remember, pleasure is always limited. If you are starved, good food is given to you, you enjoy, you are in heaven. But if you continue eating, then you are in hell again, because it is going to make you sick. But joy has no limit. Joy you can have endless. And for joy, you don't need any recognition, because it is felt internally. It is kind of food which your soul needs. If you give that food to the soul, it gets satisfaction. And you don't need any trophy or medal for that recognition. So it is, we understand that all our life, people are around us who are doing great things, good things. So instead of criticizing them, instead of worrying about that everybody is not in oneness, how can I be in oneness mode? But if you are in oneness mode, even the worldly success happens to you. Imagine a person working in an organization and they are unconditionally serving whoever is in front of them and always continuously raising their best to their better. So they are serving the co-workers, they are serving the customers, they are serving the universe, they are serving your environment, society, everyone. So that person is adding highest value. As a consequence, people around them recognize that, and that person gets promoted automatically. You become more successful if you do this task of adding the highest value unconditionally, because you don't know where and how this is going to make an impact. But if it is done by your in ego mode, what is going to happen is you have done some good work for somebody and you get criticized. So your ego is going to get hurt. Gosh, I'm trying to help this person and that person is criticizing me.
Ratanjit, we only have about a minute left. Dr. Gahani has been waiting patiently. I think he had one more question or comment.
Okay.
So I'll do what I do. I'll dig deeper. So you know a lot of people, right? Both Paramji and Ratanjit ji, you know a lot of people. So let's say if you take 100 people around you, random 100 people around you, how many of them do you see in this maximum value adding oneness mode?
But see, it really does not matter, Ghani Saab, because it is about your enrichment comes from serving your joy. So you want to be happy. The true happiness comes from really having the joy within you. And if you keep on adding the highest value, even in the most difficult circumstances, amongst the most difficult people who do not add value, you will still grow. You will still have success, unparalleled success. So it doesn't matter whether somebody else does it or no. We are constantly looking for others to do things rather than the only person you have control on is yourself, that person taking charge and doing things which make sense and they're aligned to the thought process of oneness.
And that has to be the last word here because we are out of time. I want to thank our esteemed guest host for all your intellect and your great questions, Ratanjit, for your insight as always and your love. And remember, folks, we're all playing the same game. We'll talk with you again soon.